Hello and welcome to a classic Cut Through the Noise episode. Over the next couple of weeks during the summer, we are working behind the scenes on bringing some new and exciting developments to Cut Through the Noise. So in the meantime, let's check in with some of our most popular episodes of Cut Through the Noise since we launched over 2.5 years ago. I hope you enjoy the series. Hello and welcome to Cut Through the Noise. Cut Through the Noise is the podcast that helps business leaders increase sales through elevated communications and marketing. And I'm your host, Aisling O'Rourke. I'm the founder of The Communications Coach, and we work with business leaders who want to communicate with clarity and confidence. And you are very welcome to today's episode of the podcast. Today's episode is a little bit different and a little bit special, I think. Today, we are focusing on the global behemoth that is the Swiftverse and what we can learn from a communications and marketing perspective from Taylor Swift. Yes, Taylor Swift. My guest today is the author of Good Ideas and Power Moves, 10 Lessons for Success from Taylor Swift, Sinead O'Sullivan. Now, Sinead O'Sullivan is a very talented lady in her own right. She has an MBA from Harvard Business School, where she formerly served as the chief strategist of the HBS Institute for Strategy and Communications, working with top business economists, CEOs, prime ministers, and financiers. She also worked at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Sloan School of Management and was a professor at Illinois Institute of Technology's Stewart School of Business. Sinead has also worked as an aerospace engineer and a human spaceflight designer at NASA, of all places, at its Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And she's written for everyone from The New Yorker to the Financial Times, Vogue, and The Currency. And I am delighted to bring you my conversation with Sinead O'Sullivan to Cut Through the Noise. Well, Sinead O'Sullivan, you are so very welcome all the way from Ireland, but currently talking to us from the United States to Cut Through the Noise. I have to ask straight off the bat, you're an economist. Taylor Swift and her marketing world, what drew you to writing a book about her?
Well, I mean, she is the most interesting person, at least, for the last couple of years. We've been seeing her everywhere. My interest in Taylor Swift, though, kind of precedes this recent, I don't know, people have said, is there a Swift bubble? She's become that big. For many years before her Eras tour started, I had actually tried to write, because I write for the FT and other places, and I tried to write about her. And a lot of the editors, at those places said, look, she's not that interesting. She's a growing pop star, but she's not exactly the Beatles. And I said, no, there's something really, really interesting about the way she's building her business that has just not been done before in the music industry. So I guess that part of me, the economist side of me that likes to understand, not just institutions and companies like Google or Facebook or financial markets like, the stock markets, but Taylor Swift was becoming an entire market herself. And I knew that Swifties really understood this, even if they'd lacked, the formal definition of like, what is an ecosystem and like, what are her profit margins look like. Swifties really understood that she was becoming, this kind of entire universe or market herself. And I just thought it was really interesting, this disconnect from some of the more business and finance and economics people. So I decided to write a book about her because there are two groups of people that rarely speak to each other. And I guess Taylor Swift is an incredible singer-songwriter. Many books have been written about that aspect of what she does. But so few people understand how incredible she is as this, business person is not really even the right word. I mean, she created an entire market.
Like business person, musician, not to denigrate the words or the profession, but they feel too small to encompass all that Taylor Swift is and does. Now, like the book, for listeners' benefit, it is Good Ideas and Power Moves, 10 Ideas in Business that we can learn from Taylor Swift. And as I said to Sinead before we came on air, I have been recommending this book to basically anybody who will listen over the past number of weeks because I enjoyed it that much. So I do highly recommend it. And yes, I've read it cover to cover and loved it. So that's an honest review. But Sinead, like from a communications and marketing standpoint, I think we can learn so much from how Taylor has conducted her business, regardless of whether or not we're a solopreneur or a massive enterprise. So talk to me about, the central idea behind putting this book together.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people talk about how Taylor Swift is this marketing guru. And then they'll say something like, she has great social media presence. And I talk about this in the book. She actually has virtually for many years, her fame grew in a social media blackout when she did not communicate with any of her fans. And so you kind of think, hang on a second, she's doing the opposite of what most corporations and, what any kind of typical business advice will tell you. And it clearly worked. And I think there was really something to that. People seem to understand again that she was doing something interesting, but the mechanisms through which she managed to grow were nearly the opposite of the kind of the strategies that we teach traditionally in business schools. And that is very interesting for a couple of different reasons. One, we are now living through this explosion of individual, and you kind of said solopreneurs. Look at Elon Musk, look at Taylor Swift. I mean, these are not just individuals, and that's why the term business person feels so small. These are individuals that create entire markets, not kind of operate within markets. And it is their personality and it is their very distinct business style that will dictate the industry's kind of dynamic. So Elon Musk and his very unique operating style changed how the space industry worked. In the same way that Taylor Swift and her personal style, which, is kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum to Elon Musk's, has entirely flipped how the music and entertainment industry worked. So to say that she's good at marketing, kind of, it does not really explain how she got to where she is today. And, I'm happy to talk about what some of those mechanisms are, but they're very much what she brought to the table, which had been unheard of doing before.
Unfortunately, we have to call a spade a spade. There is an element here of misogyny, and I think we glorify business leaders who are male more than we do female. But what can we as business leaders learn from Taylor Swift? Because I think, unless we're you and we sit down and we spend a significant amount of time dissecting it all, it can be, you can see it, you can listen to our conversation and you can think, yeah, fair enough. I can see where you're coming from here, but what can I benefit from here? So give me some of your advice as to how we should approach it. And I know some of that is built on building your own foundations, which is something that we talk about here on the podcast quite a lot. Like not just building your business, say, on your Instagram account or in your X account, whatever it might be. But yeah, talk to me about the learnings that we can take from Taylor Swift.
Yeah, I think, when you talk about the foundations upon which a business is built, and again, going back to Taylor Swift and people like Elon Musk, I think it's so much deeper than just what, tech platform you're using. Are you TikTok versus Instagram first? They're very different in terms of marketing styles and strategies. It actually goes much deeper than that and kind of asks this philosophical question. What are my values and how do I communicate those? Now, we talk about this all the time in marketing and strategy, but really, if you look at Taylor Swift, she takes her core values and runs them through every single aspect of her business. So there is no confusion about who she is, what she stands for, and what she's going to do. And one of the things I love about her is that she made the decision very early on in her career to play the long game. And we see this in everything she does, including her marketing and communications. Nearly everyone today is kind of, positions their business, whether it's a product, a brand around this idea of virality. All I have to do is go viral one or two times, and then I've kind of quote unquote made it. Taylor Swift's business was this kind of slow burn, although, I mean, looking at it, in the rearview mirror, she grew extraordinarily quickly at a very young age. But she made hard decisions that turned down this immediate return. And marketing is one of those. She took a hiatus from social media. And actually, that allowed the slow burn to really reach her audience. Now, if you were going to do that today, someone would say you're out of your mind. Like, don't even think about quitting social media. She took huge risks, but again, going back to what you said about the foundations, this is who she is. This is her personality. And ultimately, she was so sure of herself in that way that she was able to confidently feed that into everything, including her marketing and communications.
I think she is one person who, like, we hear the phrase trust your gut like an awful lot in this world. She is one person who I think you can clearly see has confidence in her own decision making, and she has confidence in not just being on stage but confidence as running her business. And you know what, I am going to take the long game here, and I'm going to stick to it, because I would imagine at her level over the years she's had plenty of people who have wanted her to do things faster, better, bigger, in an easier to sell way, for example.
Oh, for sure. I mean, how much money has she left on the table by not putting her name on brands? And, apart from, and I discuss this in the book, apart from the brands that reinforce her specific ecosystem in very, very real ways, you are not going to get Taylor Swift jeans, Taylor Swift makeup and underwear, which is actually that is the product and brand life that is creating most of the value for the higher wealth generation of singer-songwriters at the minute.
Going back to, that long game, and not selling jeans, Taylor Swift jeans for the sake of Taylor Swift jeans, or a branded Stanley Cup, or, whatever it might be. Her whole business is on storytelling, and in everything, the music is about the story. We know about her life story, the story of buying back her music rights, re-releasing. And storytelling in and of itself gets talked about so much in, start your own business classes, entrepreneurship courses. Oh, have you thought about the story you're going to share with your audience when you launch your business, whatever it might be? She has made narrative such an important strategy in her way of doing business, hasn't she?
You've kind of hit the nail on the head, because what you're getting at is unfortunately what most of private equity did not fully understand when they bought her albums. So you're right. It's not, I would go one step further. It's not narrative that she's selling. It's emotions. It's relationships, friendships. She's kind of that girl next door. She's never too good looking. She's not ugly. She's kind of like, she is the typical best friend that you kind of always wish you had, the older sister. And this is exactly what she has become so good at selling. And the reason why she's able to do this so authentically, and I want to go back to what we were just discussing around communication and marketing. We know that she did not have social media for a certain number of years. And, even now she doesn't put what I ate for breakfast, as a daily kind of update. It's a very kind of commercially, you imagine nearly that a team puts out her social media. But what she does extraordinarily well is understands her customers. She is in constant contact with them. She writes them letters. She will invite them over to her house. She has an incredibly good understanding, which is very, very rare for a CEO of a company her size, to understand explicitly how they feel and what they think about her. I compare her often to Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney. The CEO of Disney is not going to the local theaters and sitting with, random people watching a Marvel movie and taking notes about whether or not they enjoy it. He's looking at M&A reports from a team of investment bankers. Yeah. The emotions that she creates between fans is the currency that she trades on.
And on that, the relationship, and, you mentioned Taylor as a CEO, and we don't often enough, when we speak about Taylor Swift, we don't think of her as a CEO or even give her that title. You mentioned in the book, and it was something that I thought was really interesting, and I hadn't considered before reading your book about the hierarchy. Like, a lot is particularly when you're speaking to people about their communications and marketing and maybe thought leadership, would try and, become experts in our field and experts in our particular niche. But Taylor has taken a different approach in that her customers, her audience, they see her as one of them, not as somebody higher than them. And I find that something that I would be quite tricky to replicate, but fascinating at the same time.
Yeah, this is the fastest way to make ideas go viral or to make, we see this all the time with populism and with populist leaders. How do they become powerful so quickly? Ideas spread faster when they can move across one level, right? And this is exactly what Taylor has done so well. She's collapsed that traditional hierarchy. Again, Bob Iger at the very top of Disney, fans way at the bottom.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is in the trenches with her fans. She is on stage, during her mammoth tour, fighting it out. Whether she has a flu, a stomach bug, she's on that stage performing. She will literally stop the performance until someone that she sees needs help gets help. And this is the biggest identifier that you can get of, wait, hang on, we're all in this together. No one has fun until everyone has fun. And this is just the way that she is operated across all the different. We talk about her. She does not get talked about enough as a CEO. She has an insane amount of business units that she has to create individual strategies for. And you see this kind of weaved through all of those. And her docu-series came out recently, and you can see through that the ways that she interacts with dancers, choreographers, the insane logistics that it takes to move sets around the world, her lawyers, her finance people, the business developers, the studio where she writes. She owns her entire value and supply chain, and each of those is a separate business and a separate business unit. And she seems to effortlessly take her values and move them through each of those.
There's never a question like when you look at when you ask any Swiftie about her, what her values are, there's never a doubt in their minds. They will talk you through it. They know it inside and out. And I think from a communications perspective, like we would always say that your clients, your customers are the best brand ambassadors that money can't buy. So it's something that we really need to learn from and really need to pay attention to is how do our customers and clients feel about us and the brand and the business, whatever way you want to look at it. And I think it might sound obvious, but actually it's a huge part of communicating and marketing our businesses, isn't it?
It sounds obvious because it is obvious. The reason it doesn't happen in real life, I suspect, is because trade-offs get in the way, right? Like, it's very easy to want to be, the girl next door and to have your business be like Taylor Swift, to have those values and to stand for one specific thing. But then this thing called capitalism happens somewhere in between. And suddenly you're faced with trade-offs. If you're Taylor Swift, you're like, I could make $30 million by putting my face on one brand today. And that's a trade-off. She says no. She makes hard choices that reinforce themselves over time so that customers know exactly what you do and don't stand for. There are so few brands that customers feel as strongly about understanding values as Taylor Swift. The reason being, somewhere along the journey, a CEO or an executive will say, we'll do this trade-off this one time, and it will be immediately beneficial for Q4 results, and then we'll go back. And these little inconsistencies also add up over time to create this kind of, I don't really know what that brand stands for or who they are.
Exactly. And it's that confusion that costs the business money overall in the long run, because if you don't know what the brand or the business stands for, then you can't buy into what it is that they do as a client or a customer. And another piece I thought was really interesting in your book, but also when I looked at the docuseries around Taylor Swift, was how she managed crisis communication. And just the transparency around it. There, she was open, and this went wrong. I shouldn't have done this, or it was a willingness to be vulnerable and human with the audience, and not this, perfect CEO 24/7.
Yeah, again, I think it's the relatability is her biggest asset. And I think that we feel the authenticity from her because it's also something you can't fake when you're on stage so often. She is so public facing, especially during the multiple years she was on tour, and stuff happens and people get that. I also think you can be that vulnerable with your customers if and only if you have spent a long time building up the trust beforehand. So if they're not entirely sure that they trust that you're always going to make the right decision for them, saying, "Look, I messed up," is probably not going to result in this, "Oh, it's fine, we forgive you." There's she can only do that because fans inherently understand that she is never going to cancel a show. And when she cancels a show, they know that she would rather have been performing because this is just who she is. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. Yes, be vulnerable, but you have to earn the ability to be vulnerable, even though it's a hard thing to do and to be
You
with
have to at
us.
first be credible and trustworthy before it carries weight, really. So then, it's important that as business owners we spend time really, and I know, and particularly like I'm thinking at this time of year as well, but spend time working on the business and communicating the business values, and not just in the business and trying to keep afloat day to day.
Yeah, this is a hard one because I mean, again, I talk about this in the book. Taylor Swift. It's very, very hard to get a CEO who can simultaneously do two things. One of them is to have this kind of constant pilot perspective of, you're 35,000 feet. Does everything look okay down there? Which general direction are we going in? How do we get there? And then to simultaneously, and while you're up there, be like, I'm going to persevere. Maybe there's a bump in the road now, but let's keep going. This is good. This is positive, and I can only get through this because I feel so positive about it. And then to simultaneously be on the ground, running around, putting out fires, thinking about the small things all day, every day. And it is really hard for executives. I've worked with so many executives that are so talented at being one or the other. And a talented, executive will figure out which one they're good at and fill in the blanks with someone else. If you're a firefighter, typically you're not the macro thinker, and vice versa. Taylor Swift is this weird combination, which is very, very rare, of being both. And we kind of saw, the only other leader that kind of springs to mind when I think about that is Steve Jobs, someone who was so ferociously into the details because they understood those details compounded into the macro picture. So, Steve built Apple, Taylor Swift built, her repertoire of music. And they are both works of art, but they're products, they're commercial. And very few people can do that simultaneously.
Finally, then, Sinead, we always like to keep some bonus content for our YouTube followers. So, from a marketing and a communications perspective, and as we head into a brand new year of 2026, what's your top learnings and advice for leaders based on your studies into Taylor Swift?
There are so many. I think a lot of what she does extraordinarily well can kind of be narrowed into one strategy from which a lot of other things kind of results. And we discussed a lot of, around this already, but it really is the fact that because she has this kind of flat organization, included in organization, I'm going to include the fans. I am in Taylor Swift's organization. She is my CEO. And I say that because I am one person of many millions as a massive Swiftie that has been involved in creating her business with her. And what she has done, which is, really never been done before, is that she has collapsed the distance between narrative and building and fan and CEO. And by creating the Swiftverse, which is insanely valuable. This is her core product, these feelings and these relationships between her fans and the music, and between fans and each other. This is something that I have collaborated in. And as such, I feel a very, very strong connection and place very high value on that. And so a lot of what she does comes down to this one thing, that the distance between you and your customers is narrowed hugely to the extent that they are collaborators in the product, in the service, in the emotions, in the values that you're creating. And it's time to move beyond just we're building a product A for market B, and to build an ethos and a world in which people want to live in. And the sooner you can collapse the distance between those and create some resonance of values, and have your customers build this thing with you, the more you're going to create long-term value out of that, and create values in you in different ways that you just didn't think about before.
And being open to doing it as well, like being open to learn from the likes of Taylor Swift. And of course, Sinead O'Sullivan's book, Good Ideas and Power Moves, is available on all of those lovely platforms. But, pop into your local bookstore and ask them to order it in for you, because it's good to support local business when we can. Sinead, thank you so much for your time. If people want to find out more about you and your career and all the work that you do, where's the best place to find you?
Oh, I have a website and LinkedIn, of course. And I love hearing from people. And yeah, I actually end up writing a lot with people that reach out to me with ideas and different perspectives. So definitely, if anything resonates, get in touch, and would love to discuss further.
Well, Sinead, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Cut Through the Noise.
Thanks, Ashley.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Sinead O'Sullivan today. You may have noticed I was a little bit giddy throughout. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed looking at communications and marketing through the lens of Taylor Swift's business. It's something that I had not considered doing before I discovered the book. And again, not an ad, not being paid to do this, just really enjoyed the book, and I would highly recommend it. So what are Sinead's and my key takeaways from Taylor Swift from a marketing and communications perspective? First things first, it's about the foundations of the business. You have to own the supply chain or the infrastructure. You can't just own the product and expect everything to follow suit. Narrative, storytelling, it's a strategy, not just a decoration that you add on at the very end. Your storytelling and narrative has to form a key part of product development. It has to be aligned with your business values. And you can scale and not lose that emotional core as long as you stay close to your ideal customers and clients. Take an example from Taylor Swift. She's the CEO. Her fans think of her as a friend. So there's a lot we can learn from her. And more important than all of that is to turn our participants, our audience, into participants. Her fans co-created her brand. And that's an industrial strategy in a cultural domain, and something that I find particularly interesting, and something that we can really spend some time learning on. And it is, as I said during my conversation with Sinead, it's so important to take the time to take a step back and look at our businesses and what we want them to achieve in the longer term, and, spend real time and thought on that. Of course, if that's something that I can help you with from a communications and marketing perspective, please do get in contact with me through hello@thecommunicationscoach.ie. Remember that we also run the Clarity Collective. It's a monthly mastermind focusing in on communications and marketing for small businesses. And we really get to grips with ideas like this each and every month, and the successes show for themselves. So again, drop me a line if it's something that you might be interested in investigating. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Cut Through the Noise. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed creating it. Remember, we live in a noisy world, so we need to communicate with confidence, clarity, and authenticity if you want you and your brand to stand out from the sea of sameness and cut through the noise. Have a great week.